everyone, I'm Kelly and I'm here to talk to you about why you should use Linux. The reason I want to tell you about this is because I've used Linux for about 2 years and I've really been impressed by its grooviness, which I want to share with you. Of course, before I start, I should explain what Linux is. Though it's often referred to as a single operating system, Linux is actually a family of operating systems that share a common kernel, or the central piece of software that makes everything work. Members of this Linux family are referred to as distros, which may have different interfaces, different software, and different purposes, but they all are similar in that they are all FOSS, which stands for Free Open Source Software. This goes back to the beginning of Linux in 1991 when it was invented by Linus Torvalds of the famously abrasive personality. He uploaded it to a site on the early internet for everyone to do with it as they pleased. Now, why should you use Linux? Why should you use Linux? I've got 3 main reasons for you, each of which I'm going to be discussing in greater detail in a moment. Number 1, Linux is free in more ways than one. Number 2, Linux is safe, it has fewer viruses, and it's harder to hack. And number 3, it is easier to use, though that's something of a matter of opinion. My cousins and I say it's wonderful, and my sister says it's the spawn of Satan. Linux is free. This is free as in freedom, liberty, and independence. Linux is open source, and so it is free for you to modify it as you see fit. This gives you ultimate control over your computer, which is important to me because I don't want Apple or Microsoft telling me how I am and am not allowed to use my computer. It's also free as in free beer. You don't have to pay Apple or Microsoft for the privilege of using an operating system that you don't really own. What makes this work is the GNU General Public License, or GPL, which is what most free open source software, including Linux, is licensed under. Now, being open source is important to the safety of an operating system, which brings me to our next point. Linux is safe. The reason that being open source is important to safety is that anyone can review Linux's source code and fix bugs in it. Also, with hundreds of people actively combing the Linux source code, it's much harder to corrupt intentionally. Another reason Linux is safe is it has a smaller market share for desktop computers. You see, hackers try to exploit as many computers as possible at one time. Because there are a huge number of desktop Windows users out there, and those users tend to be less experienced, they are easier to exploit and less work for the hacker. The reverse is why hackers don't try to hack Linux. Linux has only a handful of desktop users, about 2% over the sites I looked over, and these users tend to be much more experienced. And finally, Linux is safe because it has verified packages. This means that teams, wherever a particular distro is being put together, carefully check each piece of software for bugs and malicious code. This way, they never reach you. Now, Linux is definitely safe, but although I said that Linux users are generally more experienced, this does not mean that Linux is hard to use. In fact, it's easy to use. One thing that makes Linux easy is app stores. Remember those verified packages? Software is bundled into files referred to as packages that are then downloaded through your app store and installed on your computer. There is such a wide range of software available through these app stores that if you need software that is not in the app store, you're technically advanced enough to get it yourself. Also, Linux runs very easily on older computers, and this is important for those of us that have older computers. Currently, my computer has video editing, a web browser, presentation software, and a screen recorder all running at the same time. And I'm using a computer from 2011. You see, it's extremely good for older computers. Of course, Linux is not the solution to everything. There's some instances where you just shouldn't use Linux. For example, if you are a hardcore gamer and you play Fortnite, for example, you shouldn't use Linux. If you have to use Microsoft Office and you have a bad internet connection, you shouldn't use Linux. If you have a brand spanking new computer, don't use Linux. Linux developers need time to support this new hardware. And finally, this is the big one, if you're bad at using Google, don't use Linux. Almost all of the possible problems that you could have can be solved by Googling it. However, if none of these apply to you, then go for it. Use Linux. But what's it like using Linux? You may be asking. Well, this is hard to put into words, an entire user experience in just a few seconds, but I'll say that it is fast and that I don't have to restart after updates, which may be big for Windows users. All of these here are my screenshots. These are all from my computer. I can use it in a greatly differing number of ways, which I feel makes it a lot easier to use, and I really like that. But if you want an opinion other than mine, here is my 13-year-old cousin, Jed, who has not the slightest bit of experience with computers.
Linux is very good because it's very easy to use, and it's just a great program to have, and I just like it because there's a ton of fun stuff on there you can use, and it's just a great time.
He's right. The bottom line is, Linux is a powerful operating system, and that is why I encourage you to use it. I encourage you to free yourselves, to be safe in the digital world, and to make life easier on yourselves. If any of you who are watching this video are interested in trying Linux out, please let me know, and I would be happy to provide direction and instruction on your Linux journey. Thank you.